Well, no, I'm going to, of course, be focusing on the Meier case. And since this conference is about UFOs and, supposed contacts and stuff like that, I'm going to present information, about the Meier contacts. And I'm also, going to be not shy about stating that I'm unaware of any actual other, proven contactees. I'll be at this conference, of course, to see if anybody has actually any, new information or proof on it. But I think for people that are involved in this whole field, of UFOs and all that, that it's really time that they understood that there's a great deal of difference between claims that people make quite freely about UFOs and contactees and all this stuff, and the reality of how many, if any, other contactees really are there in this world, and what's the proof for it. So I'm going to be exploring those kinds of questions.
Pardon me. Yeah, there is a big difference, because there is your case that is a legitimate case. Like Stanton would tell you that the Barney and Benny Hill case is a very extremely authentic case, which he does actually believe it really is, and to my knowledge it really actually is. But what about the other cases that people make up? I mean, not long ago, Nick Redfern come out with a book with some very highly questionable contactee cases in it. So, you got a lot of material there to cover. Are you going to be giving people any examples of some of the differences?
Well, yes. You raise very good points, really, here, because here's the thing. For instance, with Betty and Barney Hill, or even Roswell, which are, Stanton Friedman's favorite stories, let's just put it this way. There's nothing, absolutely zero evidence that remains, if indeed there was any, for either of these cases. Now, as far as Roswell goes, I'm very comfortable with the idea that Roswell was quite real. I first learned about it when I was in high school in 57 or 58, because a fellow student there, his father was in the Air Force, and he was telling me that they found a crashed flying saucer, and they took it to Ohio. I mean, this is 1957, 58, and this kid's talking to me about flying saucers. So I go back a ways with that. I've got a reference point for that. And even in the Meier case, they say, well, yes, these things did happen. This was a real, real crash, real event, and all that. The problem you have with Roswell today as being meaningful in any way is that there's nothing you can really point to that's real evidence. Where is it? You can say, well, this person said this and that person said that, blah, 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 but that doesn't mean anything. It's irrelevant. And it might, pardon me, I'm a little blunt about this stuff. It might be nice to go on what we call the rubber chicken circuit here, where people can, give lectures about all sorts of things and UFOs and what have you. But if you're going to make a claim which is effectively about the most important event and story in human history, contact between Earth people and extraterrestrials, you'd better be able to put some evidence on the table. And it's not that there haven't been experiences, events, contacts throughout history of different sorts between extraterrestrials and human beings. That's fine. I can accept that. The problem is really that there is no evidence, short of Meier's incredible evidence, that this actually has gone on and is still going on. So I am not liked by certain members, let's say, of the UFO community, because I basically have no use for the UFO community. The fact that they still haven't seemed to be able to discover the Meier case and explore it, question it, discuss it, I don't have any use for a field that, as such, doesn't know how to deal with the best evidence in human history for the thing that they claim to be looking for. So that's a bit troubling to me. I just can't. I really can't figure out, apart from people wanting to protect their careers and lecturing and stuff like that, why they won't go and deal with this Meier case. So that is my problem with that kind of thing. As far as, let's say, the book that Nick might have put out, again, where's the evidence? Whether one believes the thing or not, or, any given case or not, what can you really, show? What can you, prove to us is true? And
right.
That's where, it doesn't exist.
Okay. Now, I think I know where what you're referring to on this here. To be more specific, is like, for example, in the Roswell situation, while there's nothing to actually discredit it, and it's a good, strong case overall, it hasn't been actually proven for in the same sense as the Billy Meier's case, where you've actually got photos of the UFOs that have actually been tested, that has actually passed all the tests. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, but that's actually, that's only part of it. People in the UFO community that, do know about the Meier case, or those, let's say those people, whether they're in the UFO community or not, those people who've found out, learned about the Meier case and all, for the most part, all they would know about is, let's say, the photos, and whether or not the photos are legitimate, to banana. Some people know a little more about that, some don't, but they'll mainly know about the photos, that type of evidence. The problem is that as stunning and irreproducible and singular as that evidence is, it's not the most important evidence in the Meier case. The most important evidence in the Meier case is actually in the information that Meier published. And that is the problem. That is, that prophetic and scientific information is immense. And it, in my opinion, so confirms and corroborates the authenticity of the Meier case that it's beyond question. But most people haven't delved into it, even though I have it on the the homepage of my website, plenty of it right there.
Yeah, it's my understanding from studying the internet that actually Billy Meier has predicted several inventions before the inventions were made, as well as made prophecies that have come to pass.
Well,
based on information he got from the Pleiadians, would that be correct?
Well, it's not so much about inventions, although he has foretold that certain things would be invented or discovered and all that. That's quite true. It's really in that prophetic information, there's just volumes of stuff that he was given the information before the events occurred, before the discoveries were made, before the particular things happened. So we can prove that. Anybody can prove it. They can just go and do the research there. And that's what makes this so remarkable and so singular, because there are volumes of this stuff, and it's impossible for any human being starting back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all that, to have published all this information about things that hadn't happened yet, and for him to be correct. And it wasn't wild guessing. It wasn't like Nostradamus, where it's real mystical and you have to figure it out. He published the information, specifics. So this is where people who are just chasing after the phenomenon of UFOs, okay, you come to the Meier case, you have the best evidence ever in the world. But that's not enough. Go to the reason. You see, Royce, and for your listeners, people have to think that if indeed advanced extraterrestrial beings took the time and trouble to get to Earth, they didn't do it just to give us lights in the sky. There would have to be, what would you call it, a reason.
Motivation?
Yeah,
but a reason, motivation, same thing.
Yeah, and a big one at that. You don't, take a technological effort like that and plunge off into the depths of space and show up in some other world just so you can have people chase after your, what do you call it? Your light in the sky. It's just really, it's nonsensical. So the people who are all hung up only on this UFO aspect and quote-unquote aliens have also bought into pretty much the Hollywood idea of aliens, and grays and abductions, again, totally without real evidence. And Meier and his friends have long ago stated the majority of extraterrestrial contacts, first of all, or just even extraterrestrials in the universe, are human, recognizable as such. The kind of creatures that we fantasize in our sci-fi horror movies are pretty much the machinations of our own minds. They are not based on real beings. And the disinformation effort to keep people chasing nonsense started long ago, and it's still underway. And, you know, the people in the UFO community have bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, and there's so much misinformation out there about the UFO phenomenon that I've heard a lot wilder than what we're discussing right now that's been, you know, pretty much laid out there. People are talking about their walk-ins from other planets, and, you know, some people are just saying they had 7 children from aliens, or it gets pretty much to the extreme, I think, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's nonsense is what it is, plain and simple. If you really get down to trying to, you know, question some of these people and put them to the test about anything, they're just completely unable to be rational, to document. Nobody's a walk-in. You know, we have enough trouble when we get a headache. You know, I mean, human beings, we are complex and we're simple at the same time. We really don't have that kind of stuff going on. That's sci-fi and nonsense that we've had, you know, people have effectively sold a big load of nonsense to us. So it's unfortunate. It's truly unfortunate that people want to fall into that and believe that, but, you know, they do. So we get stuck with some really goofy stuff that people say.
Yeah, quite a bit, I would say, too. Now, on the Billy Myers case, what I wanted to ask you is he still in contact with these Pleiadians? And I might be pronouncing that wrong.
It'd be Pleiadian, yeah, the Pleiadian people.
Pleiadian,
yeah.
Okay. The J must be silent, and I keep wanting to sound it out, so I'm glad you corrected me.
It's more like a Y. Yeah, the J is pronounced more like a Y.
Which that's kind of interesting, because wasn't that similar back in Old Testament times in the ancient Jews?
That may be, and there are other languages where the J is pronounced other than, you know, the way we do it. Yeah. Even in Spanish, I think they may pronounce it more like an H sound or something, you know. So, you know.
Yeah, kind of like Jesus.
Pardon? Yeah, exactly. So the other part of this is, of course, that Meier, you asked, is he still in touch with these people? And yes, he's still meeting with them. He probably had a contact, you know, for all I know, this last week. This is just, how to put it, it is something that is going on, and that more people who claim to be interested in UFOs and extraterrestrial matters and that should really, they should have looked into it. And it's still not too late. I mean, they could still do research, but it just saddens me that, you know, they just haven't paid attention. That's the best way I can put it. They haven't paid attention.
Yeah, it seems to me like there's a lot of people that I know of that have very short attention spans. We got a caller. Would you have to go ahead and take the call real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure, please.
Okay. Area code 936, you're on the air.
Hey, Royce, how's it going?
Hello, Thomas. I was fixing to say Thomas because I recognize the 936 area code.
I just wanted to thank Michael for coming on and talking about these things, and for myself, without doing a great deal of analysis on Billy Myers and everything that surrounds him, the clincher for me that allowed me to give it credibility is that there are petroglyphs on the cave walls in the Hopi Reservation that date back some 3,500 years that are almost identical to the photographs that Billy Myers took. They talk about being...
Oh, now that's interesting.
Well, yeah. Now, since I think I've seen some photos of those, and in truth, there's a guy who put out a book, UFOs in Art History, I think it's called, something like that. And what's interesting is you will find a tremendous amount of evidence in art going back 10,000 years, going back to the, all sorts of times and places that show these types of objects, and even people in spacesuits and things like that. So in terms of the phenomenon itself, yes, you're going to. Oh yeah, I've got a link on my website to his to the page on the UFOs in artwork kind of a thing. So you can find that if they fly. But to continue the thought, these objects have been part of human history for even longer. It's just that we don't even have recorded history that goes back far enough. It's been coming and going through this planet literally for millions of years, and that would be hard to imagine, but that's the information in this case.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to...
I think some of the oldest testimony we probably have is the Sumerians' testimony of the those that came from heaven.
Yeah, the Sumerians have that, and, Zecharia Sitchin, who did a lot of work on that, got some things right, but apparently he also got quite a bit wrong, and he has, what do you call it, he thinks that Nibiru is an inhabited or formerly inhabited planet, and Meier long ago wrote about the fact that this is an uninhabited body. It's more like a comet. It doesn't have anything to do with these Anunnaki and all. And in what we have on my site, in Contact 251, there's a very thorough history about, our forefathers, too, human beings going back a long, long way. So you might want to, dig around, and you'll see some pretty interesting things.
I think I will. Anyway, Thomas, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to, again, thank your guest, and, I just wanted to make that correlation, and that's all I had. So thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Thomas. He has his own radio show called Sasquatch and Spirituality.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, and he sometimes talks about UFOs, but I thought he might be interested in talking to you if you don't mind me sharing his information about some of the spiritual work you do.
Well, sure. He may also, if he doesn't know already, be interested in a fellow named Kiwani Lapsaritis, I think is how it's pronounced, who is a guy I met.
Them two are the best of friends.
Oh, they are? Okay, good. Good. Great guy. I met him in Hawaii. He's all about the Sasquatch and stuff. Glad to know they know each other. That's cool. Yeah.
And I've had Kiwani on my show before, and that man, he's been out in the wild with the big hairy people, as Thomas likes to call them, for, 54 years now?
Well, so he says, yeah.
That's a long time to spend out there to, do research. If you've done that and you don't know anything about it, there's got to be a reason for that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let you get out of here today without asking you about your new movie coming up, Breaking the Silence. I saw it on your website. Can you tell us a little something about that movie?
Oh, yeah, that's already finished. It's available through the website or as a download. And it's a film that I did, that I produced with my daughter, and that we finished that just last year. It's a film I didn't really even think I wasn't even intending to make. I was going to do a different kind of film, and it turned out that I did one with 5 women. Not only did my daughter help me produce it, but she's one of the people interviewed. And these are 5 young women, all of whom overcame some very, very serious challenges early in their lives, everything from illness and abandonment, neglect, rejection by the family, to outright abuse, addiction, rape, incest, horrible stuff. And they just really all have powerful stories to tell. And we've won a couple awards in the film already, and hopefully we're going to get it into broader distribution this year or next. And It's just something that shows, and it's been used already by therapists with their clients and shown in some schools and stuff. It's a very powerful film, just a documentary, these women speaking for themselves. And it's good because it just also reflects how they took, responsibility for themselves and their lives, and they weren't going to allow themselves to be victimized permanently by their, the difficulties that they encountered. So it's a film I'm very happy with.
Now, the film itself, they actually tell what method they used to overcome the adversity, right?
Well, yeah, pretty well, because these were not women who were necessarily going, only one of them, I think, really did like a therapy to get through some of the stuff. They all just kind of found their own way through making better choices and deciding to not be victims and to not continue in certain directions and to choose better paths and to choose better relationships and to choose education and stuff. So it was really a testament to their own, will, their choices and decisions, and how they navigated their, themselves out of that kind of consciousness. And all of the women are still relatively young, and they, of course, still face a lot of other stuff in life. But there are many people, men and women both, who didn't do so well when they've had, such traumatic things happen to them. Many people have either become addicted or suicided and, been very lost in life from experiences that were so, devastating and horrible. And these women, are a good example. They just show that you can make a change and a difference in your own life and choose, a better direction. And they did. They propelled themselves out of that.
Sounds to me like what they basically done was made a conscious choice to take the power to take their destiny and create the destiny they wanted rather than letting life seal their fate.
Well, exactly right. And as a matter of fact, on the website there for the BreakingTheSilenceMovie.com website, we have a clip, promo clip, a trailer, and we also have the song to the film that I wrote 25 years ago, actually a little more, but I've been waiting for the right thing for it, and I put it into this film. It's called I'll Be My Own Hero. And, it's sung by a lovely young woman, too. She's not in the film, but she sings the song. And it all kind of embodies exactly that kind of a approach, that kind of a philosophy of taking, personal responsibility for your life. And the reason I even would do a film like this, too, it's very consistent with what the Meier case is about, because it isn't about running around and projecting everything onto real or imagined so-called aliens, extraterrestrials. It's about taking responsibility for your life, and then how a society of people come together who are going to be responsible and who are not going to put all their hopes and dreams out onto other people or real or imagined beings and aliens, gods, saints, spirits, guides, and all this stuff. Because we have to come to terms with the fact that we really have created all that. We've perpetuated all that, and it's hard for people who really find a lot of comfort in things that they think are, paranormal or oftentimes called spiritual, which may not be,
right.
But they take comfort in that, and the real comfort one has to find within their own consciousness. And then you can make some pretty profound discoveries about the nature of life and reality and, higher powers, whatever you want to call it. But usually you're going to come away realizing it isn't anything like what's popularly sold.
Well, it's the same thing. I've had similar talks to my kids about that, so many times in society. I'm a member of like 66 different Yahoo paranormal groups, and I see these posts all day long. They're wanting to blame Obama. They used to want to blame Bush. They used to want to blame Clinton. The government's corrupt. You hear all of this here stuff, but in all of this stuff that you see posted, the one thing I never see is where anybody says, well, you know what, guys? We're the ones that gave these people the power to do the things that they're doing by not taking our own power to create our own destiny.
Exactly. I just this morning wrote a letter or an email back response to somebody who has written, one of these everything's Obama's fault kind of letters. And first of all, I have no problem telling people I didn't vote for Obama. I didn't vote for either of them, for any of them. I didn't think it was worth my time. It was going to be more of the same no matter who was in there. That was my feeling, right or wrong. So I have no vested interest in saying anything, to champion Obama. And I don't agree with a number of things that he's doing or policies that he's either created or is, perpetuating. However, he's not the problem. It's exactly as you've said, humanity, and it's what I said in my letter this morning. People have been asleep. They just want to be entertained. They want to cheer for sports stars and pay attention to celebrities and stupid politicians. And once they get in there, these are the same people that will make the mess, and then they'll come back in a couple of years and tell you they're the ones who are going to clean it up. How stupid do we have to really continue to be to play these games? These are dead-end games. And if we don't get it by now, we're really in trouble because, it's just ain't going to happen, folks. And I'll tell you this, with all the people that are deciding now, let's have the Tea Party, or now it's time to get back to the Constitution. That's nice. That's great. But you know what? I think that based on the emotionality of a lot of people that think everything's Obama's fault, you'll notice that there is really a lack of any person that gets up and says, wait a minute, this is our stuff. If I'm elected to this office, I can only do, what I can here in this system, as long as other people are in it who are also devoted to perpetuating this nonsense, any of us, and with all the power brokers in the background. And if we don't realize what this is really about, frankly, the next person to occupy that office, if it isn't Obama again, will probably be about the worst thing ever happened to this country. Because if that comes
That's
about,
scary thought.
Yes, I may well be offending a lot of people in various parts of the country, but the worst case scenario is that it would be a right-wing, highly religious person who's going to come in on all sorts of promises and emotion and vagaries. And once they're in, they'll have to, it'll be apparent, and they may have to admit, there's nothing we can do with this system. It is so far beyond repair, or whatever. It'll be more of the same, and it would go to greater polarization in the country. And, I'll throw in something from Meier from 1981. He said in the future the U.S. will have 2 civil wars, one following upon the other. 2 civil wars. I laughed. I read it in 86, and I laughed, literally. I thought, that's so silly. How could the United States of America ever have one more civil war, let alone 2? Well, with all the stuff, all the divisiveness, all the issues, illegal immigration, the bankrupting of the states and the government, everything else, do not be surprised at the increased polarization that can take place in this country. And I don't wish for it. I just see it. And I'm not laughing anymore about that, prediction of his. I think that we're in a lot of trouble here, and until and unless people wake up and do, like, you said, hey, we're the ones that are doing this, it's not going to get better.
I can give you a good example. The recent health care reform that Obama signed in that Clinton was pushing, everybody's hollering about that, but the real truth of the matter is it was the doctors that were giving treatments that weren't necessary just to build Medicaid, and people that were going in that weren't really sick just to get pills that they can get legal, that made it necessary to push through some kind of reform. So when people do that, they gave the government power to, go in for this.
Yeah, well, you're right. The abuses in the medical system. I mean, you go to, I don't know about you. You go to a doctor's office, and you start looking at what they bill you for, and how much, and what kind of actual so-called care and interaction you may be getting for that money. The excesses are ridiculous. I mean, it is just, it's outrageous what's happened in that field. Plus, the other end of it, which cannot be denied, the bankrupting of medical systems because of illegal immigration is real. I know a retired doctor, a guy I've known for over 50 years, and I frankly thought of him as a pretty liberal kind of guy politically and all, and I said to him one day, hey, you might think I'm off here, but I really see a great deal of damage to our system, our medical system here, a lot of money. And he looked at me and he said, you have no idea. It's in the billions. The illegal immigration problem is bankrupting the medical, system. It's causing emergency rooms and even hospitals to have to either curtail or shut down. And it's because people don't, they're confused. They don't understand. You see, this is the thing. Politics, you'll think if somebody has one position and it appears to be politically left or politically right, that all their positions are going to fall in on one side of that political spectrum. And that shouldn't be the case. If you can find something that you think is true, whatever side might be agreeing with it or not, doesn't really matter. For instance, I, happen to think that certain positions that are called conservative are good and reasonable. You can't take people's guns away from them and all this stuff. But also, I also think some conservative positions are terribly wrong. And likewise, so if I think that we should allow people to own guns, and not that it should be that everybody should be walking around packing a weapon, I don't agree with that. But the people that are on the left side of the spectrum, who I think are much more enlightened environmentally, they don't get it yet about illegal immigration. They don't see that this is a mechanism. It's nothing to do with whether people are nice or not nice. It's a societal mechanism right now which will destroy elements of what the society is and has accomplished. And then if you look at one more layer of that, you can say, well, there's another reason for it. And that is because U.S. policies for decades have been very invasive. We've gone in and attacked and destabilized countries and bombed them and caused wars, all unprovoked. There are over 200 some acts of aggression by the U.S. in the past 68 years. Unprovoked. Now, sooner or later that has to come back, and now you're hearing people use the word here. They're saying we're being invaded by people who are illegal. Well, yes, that's true. And while we shouldn't be, and we shouldn't just roll over for it, we can understand that this pendulum of cause and effect is now bringing back to us certain circumstances, situations, and behaviors that we freely perpetrated on other people, never thinking that it would come back to us. Big problem.
Yeah, and the old saying, what goes around comes around, that stays in effect for all times.
There you go. I couldn't, that says the whole thing right there. That's cause and effect. That's the law of the pendulum, I like to call it. And if we had followed only one principle that was originally actually created by Confucius and then adopted, called the Golden Rule, do unto others as you have them do unto you, we wouldn't have all these troubles. No, and by we, I mean we in the U.S. and the we's in other countries. If we were minding our own business and only doing things that we would not mind having done unto us, we wouldn't do things that bring these kind of consequences to us.
Well, you'll get no argument from me on that one.
Oh, darn it.
I am serious. I have been preaching the Golden Rule as a salvation for mankind for years.
Really? Well, I couldn't agree more with you then. I couldn't agree more.
I mean, really, if people weren't doing things to other people, whether it be on a local or an international level, where would the wars be coming from if everybody treated everybody the way that they would want to be treated themselves?
Yeah, well, that's it exactly. There wouldn't be these wars, and then there wouldn't be all these people here up in arms about Obama. So like I wrote to this guy this morning, don't you know what this country has been doing to other countries, what our secret services and all the rest of the stuff have been doing? All of this stuff, money, tons and tons of money that has been sent out to harm other people, either overtly or covertly. And and all the greed and the corporations shipping jobs out of the country and everything in the medical. Don't blame one man for the fact that you human beings have been asleep. We here in this country, what have we been doing except wanting to be entertained more and more? So we're not thinking about what is being done unto others in our name.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, what we're not doing. So we get this mess.
Yeah, because here in America, I can't remember when the last time was, if there ever was a time, that the watchman, our government, has had a watchman. The old saying, who's watching the watchman? Yeah,
exactly. Who's watching the watchman? Well, we've now seen that somebody, those who may have been watching, a lot of them, of course, have been suppressed and have been attacked and tried to be discredited, and some people have been, of course, eliminated. And the powers that be don't take kindly to that kind of thing. They don't want accountability, but it's coming to everybody. We're not going to be able to avoid it. It's like this thing with the Gulf spill, and you're far closer to that than I am. That's going to affect almost everything on this planet in one way or another, sooner or later. That oil didn't magically disappear, folks. It did not magically disappear. Gosh knows what we're going to be
now
seeing.
That thing was gushing 2 or 3 months. That was way too much to just sit and, oh, well, it's gone tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Well, like the Pleiadian told Meier, in a given period of 88 days, 304 million gallons of oil. You know what happens if you spill a quart of oil in a swimming pool? Oil and water, you're talking a bad mixture here. And you 300 and some million gallons of oil. And this is doing the visible and the invisible damage. And everything that we know in life, because it's so intimately connected to food chain and oxygen production and everything else, we ain't seen the end of that. We just haven't. And
for example, what about fish that swim through the oil that live and carry it back out into the ocean with them and get it up and around the other fish? It's going to affect the flavor if not people self could eat the fish.
You're right. That's the thing. It's spreading and has spread and will spread in so many ways, just as you've described. It will be in the food chain. These are just things that now you have this ignorant company talking about they want to return there at some point and drill the oil. Here's something. Look, Meier was told as far back in print as 75, 76, don't extract oil and natural gas and don't be mining all the ores out of your earth because you're going to create increase in earthquake, volcanic eruptions, the earth will collapse in on itself, sinkholes, which we're having. All this stuff is coming your way if you don't stop this insanity, because you're taking out this fluid that the plates of the planet rest on and buffer, the plates. So stupid human beings in their greed just decide, well, we can make stuff out of this. We can burn it and push things around with it. Who cares about anything else? We don't care about the environment, the air, the water. We don't even care about the fact that sooner or later these megaquakes are going to be happening and things are just going to be falling back in on things. And it's starting to happen.
Yeah, and the thing about it was that all this here stuff was predicted even long before Billy Myers, even in the Bible. This stuff was predicted in other religions around the world. And I think it's the Pleiadian who's probably been working in the background with different groups of people down through the millennia, warning them of these things all along.
Well, when you say predicted, when people search my website and they go into the predictions sections, they will find that there are predictions in there that are said to be the original predictions of Enoch, Elijah, and Jeremiah. And these did not make their way into the Bibles because it was too threatening for those people that were putting this stuff in religious form. These original prophets were never intending either themselves, their lives, or the teaching and prophecies to be made into religions. This was always intended...
Now that I believe.
Yes. Well, you know, this is at the core of the Meier material is some very unsettling stuff for people that hold strong religious views, because they, quite frankly, view that, you know, the religions have been the enemies of humanity. They have been the enslaving force of great numbers of people. They have been the cause of untold numbers of brutal deaths throughout history. And no, they're not alone. I mean, communism, yeah, this kind of stuff, Maoism, all that, horrible stuff. But you're talking about going back in time before communism significantly, and you're talking about inquisitions and and crusades and different types of things. You can go back to the Old Testament, where the God being of the Old Testament was commanding the various Israelites to go and slay every man, woman, child, and infant in their mother's arms without mercy, so that the ancient Hebrews, Israelites, could steal their lands, which did not belong to them in the first place, to my own ancestors, right, if I may add. This was commanded supposedly by the same, omnipotent, quote-unquote, God, who supposedly gave Moses the Ten Commandments, one of which was, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder innocents. And in the same book, he's got them out there slaying people by the tens of thousands, including babies and children and women and the elderly. Something tells me that's not the creator, the creational force of this universe. Sorry. And you won't get an argument on that from Meier, because they're saying, what's wrong with you people? Really, you think this is what reality is?
Well, you made the comment earlier about that. You said about being worried about a right-winger, or should you say a fundamentalist Christian getting into the office. I was going to say to you right then that I've already told my kids, if Christianity ever got in a position of power, I could see the world returning to a dark ages like it did the first time the church had power.
Well, I'm afraid you're right. I think that if it's so that what Meier, has said about the two civil wars and all that, I think that it will be to a good degree, because, well, the other part that actually he says in there, he says it can't be helped but that the country will break up into 5 territories, some under dictatorial, sectarian rule. That you will see that that's what they will start to try to bring about. It won't be pretty. And
okay, now was he referring to the United States when he said that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this is in what's called the Enoch Prophecies.
I've read about those.
Yeah, it's on my website. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll read you and your listeners here the exact paragraph. Let me see.
Oh, wait, real quick, before you do. Are
Sure.
you in a hurry? Can I extend this here show for just a few more minutes to give you time to cover this?
I can do a few more, and then I've got to go, unfortunately, a little after 1 my time, but I can go a little.
Okay.
I've got to be somewhere.
Okay, well, let's try to just see if we can get this here squeezed in real quick then.
Sure. Here it goes. This is in the Enoch Prophecies on my website. Yet the misery on earth will continue as 2 terrible civil wars will break out in America, whereby one will follow the other. Afterwards, the United States of America will break apart, and deadly hostility will prevail among her, which then leads to the division into 5 different territories, and it cannot be prevented that sectarian fanatics will play a dictatorial role.
That makes perfect sense.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it does, because the first thing I can see is the fundamentalists creating a war. And all along you had the Republicans had certain areas of the South that they had have dominated all of the time that America's existed. And you could see how people would, well, this state's going to go with the Republicans, this one's with the Democrats. And the Republicans are made up 90% of Christians.
Yeah. You know, and the funny part about this, in a way, on the other hand, Meier, people that are involved with this material, we don't think, we don't say that people shouldn't believe what they want to believe, because that you have to be free to do that and to discover for yourself what truth is if you want. And if you adopt a certain religion or something else and you're not trying to harm other people, that's really one's own business. Of course, they are clear to say, look, we want to tell you this is not, based in truth, and there's a lot of danger from it and all of that. But you also have to respect people's rights to believe what they want. And, if we respected each other primarily, if we simply, as a basic thing of life, had respect for each other, we wouldn't even adopt viewpoints such as some of the fundamentalists have, in my opinion, that could lead us to do this kind of harm to people, It's too bad that there is such a prevalence of that particular religious, flavor in that party, because it's not a good mix.
And that is true, and I always agree with separation of church and state. I mean, I'm all for God, don't get me wrong, I really am, but I don't think religion and God are coming from the same base of operation, and I don't think religion and state makes a good mixture to run a country.
Absolutely. I have to agree with you. I think that we'll see at a certain point what's true, what isn't true, and ultimately we won't have religions. That's still a long way down the road. We'll have spiritual truth, but that is a very long way down the road. And hopefully, hopefully it would come sooner rather than later. But I don't think we should hold our breath for it.
Yeah, because you don't know exactly how long sooner is going to be, much less how much longer is going to be. But you are going to be covering quite a bit of this here in pretty much detail at Angel Fire, am I correct?
I'm going to go into as much of it as possible. Actually, just to give a little preview of what my intention is actually to help facilitate my presentation as one in which I can respond to questions even more than simply coming with a set presentation that it has to be this way. I want to, because people that are going to come to my presentation will already probably be a little familiar with the Meier case, and who I am, to have read up on some stuff. I want to be able to answer questions as best I can from the perspective of the Meier material.
Which I think you've been doing a good job of that right here on the show tonight.
Oh,
well,
I
say tonight. It's daytime, actually, so I correct myself and stand corrected on that one, but you know what I mean on that. But yeah, because I've heard you went back to the Meier's material and pointed out that, the Pleiadians have mentioned this to him before, and you mentioned a purpose for them coming here. Do you have any idea what the purpose was for their visit in the first place?
Well, yes, and what is stated in this case is this, that long ago, when extraterrestrials were coming to Earth, they were representing themselves as God or the gods, Lord and Master, all this stuff, and they set in motion all this religious stuff that we've got now. Now, what they're saying, because they're saying that this does not, the religions are not true, that they have an obligation, because some of these gods were their own forefathers, some of them, and they are trying to help us to get ourselves straightened out, but they cannot directly interfere or intercede. They cannot land and make contact with lots of people. They can't do all this stuff, because we would only lose more ground. We would transfer all of our attention to them again, and we worship them all over, and or we'd go crazy and try and kill them, or all of these things. So they have determined that the best thing to do is to present their information through this man, Meier, and hopefully over time we will study and test this stuff and find out how true it may be and what we can do with it, and correct ourselves from our very wrong direction. So their connection to us is ancient, and it will only be in the distant future that we have any reconnection with them, if any. But they have tried to help rectify and rebalance the errors that some of their own forefathers contributed to here.
Okay, now, so I would take it then that they probably have some relation to the Pleiadians maybe as well?
Here's the whole thing. The whole thing with Pleiadians started when Meier published his information and said that these were the Pleiadian people. There are no Pleiadians. This is something people in the UFO community might want to pay attention to. That was a term coined by the Pleiadian and Meier. And the reason for it, because Meier even asked them, well, why should I use this term? You're not called Pleiadian. And they said to him, the reason for it is this: once you have been publishing your material and you use this name Pleiadian, lots of people are going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to claim to be channeling Pleiadians, having contacts with Pleiadians, that they're going to have Pleiadian boyfriends and girlfriends, you name it. And when they use that term, then you, Billy, are going to know that they're lying, and ultimately so will the world later on. That's the trick they played. So when people tell you that they are channeling Pleiadians, that they are Pleiadians, that they can't, there is no such thing. There's no life in the Pleiades that we see in the night sky. None. That's it.
Wow. So these people either they're out and out knowingly lying, or they've actually come to believe what they say themselves, but it's not true, or whatever the case may be.
Both. Both. Some people are just a bit deluded. They're making it up in their own minds without knowing they're doing that, and it leads to schizophrenia. Some people deliberately decided to, cash in on this, and now they may even believe it themselves, but it's nonsense. And you can tell if you ever compare the writings of any of these people, Barbara Marciniak, Barbara Hand-Clow, anybody, Fred Bell, any of these people talking about Pleiadians, it's very silly, non-substantial, insubstantial, non-verifiable, unless there's, and some of them also steal material from Meier and then move it around and pretend it's theirs. There was a guy named Alex Collier who originally gave me the Meier material. It wasn't even his real name. He made up a whole lying story about himself based on this. This is a problem. These people, this UFO community and all this nonsense has done more harm to the truth in many ways than even the governments and the people who are deniers and skeptics. That is a terrible thing to have to say, and I tell you right now, in my opinion, it's painfully true.
And I tend to agree with you, because you would not believe some of the stuff that I've read over the years. I've been a big proponent of the ancient astronaut theory for years now, and I've done a lot of studying ancient religion, spirituality, alchemy, Hermetic traditions, and I think I'm pretty well qualified after so much study to be able to say that you'd be a lot better off studying spirituality and the Hermetic tradition than you would studying, religion, for example. But again, like you said earlier, everybody has to do what they have to find their own path. Otherwise, there's no set really faith within them if they're just going along with somebody else.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Exactly. It's just, yep.
But yeah, you said a lot of things here tonight that made me really kind of wish that we had more time to go in this, but I do understand you have another appointment. It would be my pleasure to have you back on the show sometime at a later date, and we can discuss more in detail if you don't mind.
Sure. Maybe we can do that more in the fall sometime, and definitely we can look at that. I'd be happy to do it, because you ask really you ask good questions, and I think it's a really, really good way to go. So, sure, absolutely.
Well, thanks, Michael. I really do appreciate that, and I appreciate the compliment. And the fall works out really pretty good for me because I'm pretty much into September right now. So by the time I get past that, we'll be in the fall.
All righty. Well, let us definitely talk about it, and maybe towards probably somewhere in the late fall area. I guess we could set something up. And if you email me your best mailing address, we'll see to it that the film gets out to you. The Silent Revolution of Truth, so you can also see and hear Billy Meier talking, about his experiences himself.
I will definitely do that. And the 54 seconds we got left, I real quick want to thank my listeners for coming and partaking in the show. I'm always glad to see y'all here, and I couldn't have a show without you, and I make sure I always like to remind you I haven't forgotten that. I'm going to get my address out to you, Michael. We got 36 seconds left, so I'm going to end the show for right now, but I will send you my email address, and I do have your email address.
Before the discoveries were made, before the particular things happened, so we can prove that. Anybody can prove it. They can just go and do the research there. And that's what makes this so remarkable and so singular, because there are volumes of this stuff, and it's impossible for any human being starting back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all that, to have published all this information about things that hadn't happened yet, and for him to be correct. And it wasn't wild guessing. It wasn't like Nostradamus where it's real mystical and you have to figure it out. He published the information, specifics. So this is where people who are just chasing after the phenomenon of UFOs, okay, you come to the Meier case, you have the best evidence ever in the world. But that's not enough. Go to the reason. You see, Royce, and for your listeners, people have to think that if indeed advanced extraterrestrial beings took the time and trouble to get to Earth, they didn't do it just to give us lights in the sky. There would have to be, what would you call it, a reason.
Motivation?
Yeah,
but a reason, motivation, same thing.
Yeah, and a big one at that. You don't, take a technological effort like that and plunge off into the depths of space and show up in some other world just so you can have people chase after your, what do you call it? Your light in the sky. It's just really, it's nonsensical. So the people who are all hung up only on this UFO aspect and quote-unquote aliens have also bought into pretty much the Hollywood idea of aliens, and grays and abductions, again, totally without Well, no, I'm going to, of course, be focusing on the Meier case. And since this conference is about UFOs and, supposed contacts and stuff like that, I'm going to present information, about the Meier contacts. And I'm also, going to be not shy about stating that I'm unaware of any actual other, proven contactees. I'll be at this conference, of course, to see if anybody has actually any, new information or proof on it. But I think for people that are involved in this whole field, of UFOs and all that, that it's really time that they understood that there's a great deal of difference between claims that people make quite freely about UFOs and contactees and all this stuff, and the reality of how many, if any, other contactees really are there in this world, and what's the proof for it. So I'm going to be exploring those kinds of questions.
Pardon me. Yeah, there is a big difference because there is your case that is a legitimate case. Like Stanton would tell you that the Barney and Benny Hill case is a very extremely authentic case, which he does actually believe it really is, and to my knowledge it really actually is. But what about the other cases that people make up? I mean, not long ago, Nick Redfern come out with a book with some very highly questionable contactee cases in it. So, you got a lot of material there to cover. Are you going to be giving any people any examples of some of the differences?
Well, yes. You raise very good points, really, here, because here's the thing. For instance, with Betty and Barney Hill, or even Rob, the problem is really that there is no evidence, short of Meier's incredible evidence, that this actually has gone on and is still going on. So I am not liked by certain members, let's say, of the UFO community, because I basically have no use for the UFO community. The fact that they still haven't seemed to be able to discover the Meier case and explore it, question it, discuss it, I don't have any use for a field that, as such, doesn't know how to deal with the best evidence in human history for the thing that they claim to be looking for. So that's a bit troubling to me. I just can't. I really can't figure out, apart from people wanting to protect their careers and lecturing and stuff like that, why they won't go and deal with this Meier case. So that is my problem with that kind of thing. As far as, let's say, the book that Nick might have put out, again, where's the evidence? Whether one believes the thing or not, or any given case or not, what can you really show? What can you prove to us is true? And
right,
that's where it doesn't exist.
Okay. Now I think I know where what you're referring to on this here. To be more specific, is like, for example, in the Roswell situation, while there's nothing to actually discredit it, and it's a good, strong case overall, it hasn't been actually proven for in the same sense as the Billy Meier's case, where you've actually got photos of the UFOs that have actually been tested, that has actually passed all the tests.
Roswell, which are, Stanton Friedman's favorite stories. Let's just put it this way. There's nothing, absolutely zero evidence that remains, if indeed there was any, for either of these cases. Now, as far as Roswell goes, I'm very comfortable with the idea that Roswell was quite real. I first learned about it when I was in high school in 57 or 58, because a fellow student there, his father was in the Air Force, and he was telling me that they found a crashed flying saucer and they took it to Ohio. I mean, this is 1957, 58, and this kid's talking to me about flying saucers. So I go back a ways with that. I've got a reference point for that. And even in the Meier case, they say, well, yes, these things did happen. This was a real, real crash, real event, and all that. The problem you have with Roswell today as being meaningful in any way is that there's nothing you can really point to that's real evidence. Where is it? You can say, well, this person said this and that person said that, blah, 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 but that doesn't mean anything. It's irrelevant. And it might, pardon me, I'm a little blunt about this stuff. It might be nice to go on what we call the rubber chicken circuit here, where people can, give lectures about all sorts of things and UFOs and what have you. But if you're going to make a claim which is effectively about the most important event and story in human history, contact between Earth people and extraterrestrials, you'd better be able to put some evidence on the table. And it's not that there haven't been experiences, events, contacts throughout history of different sorts between extraterrestrials and human beings. That's fine. I can accept that.
Is that what you're referring to?
Well, but that's actually, that's only part of it. People in the UFO community that do know about the Meier case, or let's say those people, whether they're in the UFO community or not, those people who've found out, learned about the Meier case and all, for the most part, all they would know about is, let's say, the photos and whether or not the photos are legitimate to banana light. Some people know a little more about that, some don't, but they they'll mainly know about the photos, that type of evidence. The problem is that as stunning and irreproducible and singular as that evidence is, it's not the most important evidence in the Meier case. The most important evidence in the Meier case is actually in the information that Meier published. And that is the problem. That is, that prophetic and scientific information is immense. And it, in my opinion, so confirms and corroborates the authenticity of the Meier case that it's beyond question. But most people haven't delved into it, even though I have it on the the homepage of my website. Plenty of it right there.
Yeah, it's my understanding from studying the internet that actually Billy Meier has predicted several inventions before the inventions were made, as well as made prophecies that have come to pass.
Well,
based on information he got from the Pleiadians, would that be correct?
Well, it's not so much about inventions, although he has foretold that certain things would be invented or discovered and all that. That's quite true. It's really in that prophetic information, there's just volumes of stuff that he was given the information before the events occurred.